This is Brad Templeton from Robocars.com, but today I'm going to talk about one of my other areas of interest, which is astrophotography. Coming up on October 14th is a type of solar eclipse known as an annular partial eclipse. This is not a real eclipse and does not look like one because the moon is too small in the sky to cover the sun. But it does cover most of it, and if you're in the right place, when it is dead center, it forms a ring, or annulus in Latin, and thus the name. This eclipse will travel in a path a few hundred miles wide from Oregon to South Texas. If you're outside the central path, you won't see the ring, but you will see an ordinary partial solar eclipse, though possibly a much more complete one if you were close. If you were watching in 2017, when a total solar eclipse traversed the USA, you saw pretty much everything from an annular eclipse. And if you were in the narrow totality path, you saw much, much more. A total eclipse is the most spectacular natural phenomenon you can see on this planet. Grander than the Grand Canyon, more dramatic than Yosemite, more worth pining for than the fjords of Norway. It's really that good. A partial eclipse is nothing like it, even standing just outside the path of totality. If you happen to live in the annular path or close to it, it can still be fun, though. Just don't think you will have seen an eclipse when done. You're in luck, though, because a real total eclipse is coming April 8th of 2024, moving from the same part of Texas up to Ontario and along the border through New England and Newfoundland. That's the one to make a special effort to see. I've traveled very long distances 6 times to see one of those, and will again. I won't bother with the 6-hour drive to see the annular eclipse, though I did drive to see one 10 years ago in my area. A partial eclipse, which includes the non-total part of a total eclipse and all of an annular eclipse, can only be directly viewed with a special solar filter or a number 14 welding glass. Viewing it directly without the filter can damage your eyes. Only when an eclipse is total do you look at it without filters or directly through telescopes and binoculars. For this one, direct viewing must be only through filters. You can photograph through filters too, but it turns out your most interesting photographs, if you wish to take them, may well be indirect, and for that you won't need filters. For most people, I recommend you just enjoy the eclipse and don't bother to photograph it, particularly not directly. Get some solar glasses or filters to take a few glances, but pay attention to and photograph the world around you. The problem is, a direct photograph of a partial eclipse is frankly not that interesting. It's basically identical, essentially, to a photograph of the filtered sun, which you can take anytime with a black circle masked out like you could do in Photoshop. If you have a quality telescope, you might discern a bit of texture to the edge of the moon, making it look slightly different from a Photoshop circle, but it will be hard to see. If you have the gear, take it, but pay more attention to some other techniques too. Now, there is one special exception. If the partial eclipse, and in particular the annulus part, takes place at sunrise or sunset when the sun is masked by the haze. People have taken dramatic photos at this time and even glanced with the naked eye. The partial eclipse does sunrise and sunset over the oceans in this case, so you won't be able to see this. Check out this photo I made of something like an eclipse, namely a crossing of the sun by the planet Venus, which was done at sunrise and could be seen with the naked eye. There are other and better guides out there to photographing the sun through a filter, if you want to do that. I'm here to suggest to you some other things to create memorable photos. The main approach there is to photograph people and the environment during an eclipse, not the eclipse. You can't really photograph the eclipse with anything, though you can take a photo like this of a person holding a solar filter or welding glass in front of the sun. In many places, however, the sun will be high overhead, which can make posing this a challenge. The other way to get the shot is to look for or make a projection of the crescent or rising sun. The leaves of trees tend to make small pinholes where they meet, and a pinhole will project the sun. Look on the ground during the eclipse under the trees, and you may see lots of little crescents at the right time, rings, all over the ground in the shadow of the tree. People can stand among these projected images or even stand to have them on your body. You can also make a deliberate pinhole projector. Just take a piece of cardboard and poke a hole with a pin. Hold it over something like your shirt and you will project an image of the sun onto it. And for a fun trick, draw or write something by poking many pinholes. For example, you can make pinholes to write out 2023, and if you hold the card not that far, you will see that spelled out in little crescents or ring suns. If somebody has a telescope on a tripod and knows what they are doing, you can project a very large, bright, and high-quality image of the partial sun onto anything, including sunspots. A screen is best and is a fairly good and fairly safe way to observe the progress of the eclipse, but you can also pose with the image or project it onto people's shirts. Make sure to never look into the telescope and set it up so that nobody who happens to walk by will accidentally look into it. That's part of what is needed to know how to do this. You can also make videos. Put a phone or video camera on a tripod and point it at your group. Record the group in the annular phase, which will be a few minutes long. If there's a projected image of the sun, you can be recording that along with the reactions of your group. You can, of course, also take funny pictures of people wearing solar filter glasses. All the crescent phases will repeat in reverse order after the peak of the eclipse. But people tend to want to pack up after the peak. But you can get a few photos then and thus avoid taking photos while you're instead experiencing the run-up. Even if it's cloudy, you can make a video or time lapse of how dark it gets. In the annular part, it'll even get decently dark, though not night dark like a total eclipse. If your eclipse is 99% partial or annular, you can also notice and photograph things in your environment. Animals may react to the eclipse. I've seen animals start to bed down as though night is coming. You'll also notice when the eclipse is more than about 95% that the light is quite strange and shadows of everything have become sharper. That may be harder to photograph than it is to see. Either way, enjoy the experience of this eclipse. But really, make your plans for where you'll be on April the 8th when a total eclipse takes place along that path from Texas to Ontario. Hope to see you there.